Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder and this is BRN AM for Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. And here are our top stories. The New York Times pulls out of Apple News and tech employees selling job referrals. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Daniel Klein is Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey there, Jeff. How are you? I remember the days pre-pandemic when I used to write a lot of articles. Now, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, now a lot of people are reading or watching video and listening to podcasts.
We have stepped up our video and podcasts. I pre-pandemic, I wrote 15 to 20 articles a week. I do the same amount of research now, but I write maybe 5 articles in a week. It's interesting how this has sort of changed consumption habits, what people are reading, sort of how they read it, which I'm saying this because it segs a little into our next topic.
Yeah, I mean, Apple News launched a curation product about a year and a half ago. New York Times is very noted paper of record, right? I mean, a lot of people around the globe read the New York Times. They recently pulled out from Apple News. I'm curious to know what your take is on this, Dan.
So they're making a bet that not being for free on Apple News will push more people to their service. They've always been really careful with their content and protecting their paid brand. I'll give an example, and I feel like this isn't proprietary because it's 10 years ago, but when I worked for MSN, for what is now the MSN Finance app or Money app or whatever they're calling it, we had paid deals with a number of content providers. And I know that many of those deals were unlimited. If there was a deal with the Motley Fool, they could take all the content they want. They could put it wherever they wanted, use it however they wanted. They paid a flat amount. With New York Times, it was a very significant number, and we could use 4 articles a day across news, sports, and finance, meaning that as an editor, you can't just go in and pick a New York Times article. You had to go to our twice-a-day meetings and argue for why you should be able to use that article. And sports might say, oh, but wait a minute, like Yankees are playing the Dodgers. Like I really want the New York Times take on that at 11 o'clock tonight. So they were very careful. We weren't even allowed to edit their headline. So sometimes we wouldn't use their article because the headline was too long and it didn't fit well on the format for the site. So they've been very protective. And I think this is a calculated risk. Their subscriptions have skyrocketed during the pandemic. The hunger for credible news is way up. We've noticed that at Motley Fool. I'm sure that's the case at the New York Times. So they're making a bet that by pulling everything under their own tent, more people are going to say, you know what? I read 3 or 4 stories from the New York Times on Apple News every day. I really want that content. I want to go back and get it. And my guess is that if they can add, a few thousand subscribers, 10,000, 100,000, whatever the number is, they're assuming that's going to be worth more to them than whatever they're getting paid, whether it's a revenue share or a straight pay from Apple News.
Does this mean, Dan, that other, think about the Dallas Morning News, Baltimore Sun, other periodicals that are on Apple News follow suit? Or is it kind of the herd mentality? One, if it works for New York Times, which is, again, a pretty prominent paper of record, others will follow.
I don't think so. There's only a few national brands when it comes to newspapers. You could argue the Washington Post, you could argue the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. A tier below that, but still pretty strong. I would still argue for the Boston Globe. Being an alumni, I am a little bit biased, but those are the only ones that you might be sitting in, Wisconsin and go like, I should get the New York Times. That's the paper of record. You're not going to go, you know what, I should get the Houston Chronicle. So even though that's a fine paper, there's actually a number of Globe alumni at the Houston Chronicle. That said, that matters to you if you live in the greater Houston area. They're going to have stories that surface on a national basis, and it makes more sense for them to work with partners, whereas the New York Times is really a national paper, as is the Wall Street Journal. So their playground is just bigger than their rivals, so they don't need, USA Today, you could argue, is a national paper, but because it doesn't have the reporting base it used to, it makes sense for them to essentially put their content every place. It's not as special as it once was. You used to buy the New York Times because it was the only the New York Times, the USA Today, because it was the only national place to follow sports. That is no longer the case. So I think this is a very unique, with maybe applying to 3 or 4 or 5 companies at the most. So I don't think we're going to see an exodus from Apple News. That said, I'm not sure Apple News has worked to the level Apple would hope it does.
Yeah, I think this is like, I would kind of categorize Apple News under the Apple Plus, TV Plus. Is this an area, the streaming service that they launched? I mean, is this a level, is this at the same level of success that you would see for an iPhone or some of the other devices that they created?
So it's a very high bar for Apple. I would argue that Apple TV Plus is a giant disaster. Why are you spending hundreds of millions of dollars producing big ticket shows starring Jennifer Aniston and Steve Carell and whoever else is in the morning show? I think that's what it's called, that nobody watches. This makes no sense. They should right now license all that content to Netflix and be done with it. Apple News is like 8 guys in a room curating headlines. It is not a big expense. It's a nice little add-on. They didn't play it up on anywhere near the level they did Apple TV Plus. Mm-hmm. Nobody's getting an iPhone because of Apple News. In fact, I forget about Apple News, even though it shows up in your alerts. It is not one of my news sources, and I would argue that I devour more news than almost anybody except you in a given day, based on programming for an afternoon show that's news-driven. But that said, I don't think Apple News is a success, but I also don't think it's a failure. It's a nice little shiny bauble that's an add-on to the overall wonderful experience of using an iPhone.
Yeah, they can say they do it. Dan, what's interesting, you talked about consumption of news, and what I've been reading about is a lot of people are consuming local news. So your local, NJ.com is an example here in New Jersey. People, I guess because of the COVID crisis and how it impacts them, their community, so they're tuning more into local television, but also local digital sites. And curious to get your take on that, and if you think that is a trend and a continuing trend post, if we ever get through this pandemic, or if it kind of reverts back to the more national consumption that we had prior.
So, Jeff, I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit, but you were sitting here talking with the greatest local news editor of all time. And I will say that because when I ran a local newspaper, I ran the Register Citizen in Torrington, Connecticut. I ran the Bristol Press and the New Britain Herald. When I ran those papers, you know what I put in my local newspaper? Local news. I had a small team of reporters, 4 or 5 at each paper, and I made those reporters write any story. If there was a Cub Scout dinner and somebody got us a photo, that made it in the paper, on a roll. So when national stories happened, we gave it a local perspective. The space shuttle blew up during one of my editorial stints there. We sent local reporters to cover local reaction. There was no Associated Press in my local newspaper. Why are we going to these sites now? Because the reality of now forced them to do their job, which is cover local news. Is it hard to have a tiny newsroom and cover a ton of local content? Yes, it is. As an editor, I used to sit there and rewrite local press releases to put in the paper. I used to type up police blotter. I worked 14-hour miserable days sometimes. That is the gig you're signing on for. All of these publications, pre-COVID, maybe not all of them, maybe there are some good ones, but I haven't seen too many. They were filled with national news and things you could get from a better source. If I open up the Palm Beach Post, I want to know what restaurants are opening or closing. I want to know what happened at the school board meeting. That is the role of these papers, and the pandemic has forced them to embrace it, and maybe they'll learn a lesson I have been screaming from the rooftop for, 20 years.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I think it's certainly an exciting time and even challenging time in the news and media business. Well, Dan, I want to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to Dan about tech workers buying referrals for tech jobs. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. We're talking to Daniel Klein, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Dan, thanks for staying around with us this morning.
Hey there, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Always great to talk with you. So, very interesting segment. We're going to shift in segment 1. We're going to shift from media and news to something that actually I kind of find disturbing. Tech workers who are looking for work paying for referrals. Dan, this bothers me on so many levels. So people are actually going out and paying for someone to be a referral source. I don't know what the money is, but it just seems downright odd to me, or so dishonest.
It is dishonest, it is unethical, but it also underscores the problem of hiring at big companies. And this is Microsoft, Facebook, Google. These are the desirable tech places to work. And I know, and this may have changed, but when I worked at Microsoft, and I was a vendor, so I didn't have to go through this process, but I multiple times interviewed for internal jobs and went through this process. In one case, my boss was fired right before I got the job. In the other case, the project was eliminated right before I got the job. So I had some success with this, even though it didn't work out. But you basically run an interview gauntlet. You meet with the first person who passes you on to the second person. And if there's something they don't like about you, they tell the second person about that. So they more or less find your weakness and exploit it. So it's really difficult to get an interview in the first place at these companies. And then the interview process is designed to make you fail. As a coder, there is usually a test problem. Those problems can sometimes be found on the internet, or what those problems are going to be like. And I feel like, okay, coding is something, there is some base level where you can test, does this person know his stuff or not? I know that, Jeff, you recommending me would mean something, because we've been doing this together for, I don't know, a few years. It's been a very long time. And you could say, yeah, Dan's a great media personality. He's very helpful offset. He's willing to put himself out there. Those are things that, realistically you could say about me, and someone could look into our background and say, okay, well, it's reasonable that Jeff would say that. I don't put a lot of stock in, and this is true of my own LinkedIn. So-and-so has endorsed you for copy editing. And I'll be like, I don't know who so-and-so is. And in reality, I am a mediocre copy editor. I don't really want to be endorsed for copy editing. That is not a skill I hang my hat on. I am a great make your story better editor. I am not a great technician as an editor. So I think there is underlying a problem where I know when I hire someone, I'm going as much gut as background, unless it's a very technical position. So I want to spend some time with the person. If I ask for references, I'll ask for references like give me your closest work friend. Let me talk to that person. And of course, that person's going to say nice things. They're also going to say honest things. I think this undercuts an automated system that is broken. I know that back when I was looking for jobs, I paid a resume service $400, and they redid my resume. And my resume contains, and it still does to this day, a paragraph of gobbledygook, project manager, SEO-driven results, and that's because a lot of companies are using a digital screener, and that screener is looking for those words. That is not a great way to pick people. And I understand your Microsoft, your Google, your Facebook, your Amazon, you're getting a lot of applications. Hire more people to go through those applications. Have introductory interviews with people. I'm part of a service that does mock interview training, I guess it would be called. It's called Online Career Fair. And friends of mine were helping out there. And I do 20-minute interviews with kids in college who are graduating, and I answer questions about their career and preparing for interviews. I get to know those kids a little bit. My sessions always go like 40 minutes, not 20. And sometimes I'd recommend them for jobs based on how dynamic they are, how exciting they are. It doesn't take a lot to screen candidates. You shouldn't need a recommendation that you paid for from someone who doesn't truly know you, which could be uncovered in like 8 seconds.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And besides, it's unethical. I mean, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. And I know people, maybe there's some desperation, as you said, to work at these big companies. But if I'm these big companies, and forget it's just tech companies, if I'm at a financial firm or I'm a big corporation looking to hire, you really got to take a look at your hiring practices, how you go about doing that. I think it's obviously very challenged in today's environment because a lot of stuff is now virtual. I mean, when's the next time people are going to go in for a physical face-to-face, not physical, but face-to-face interview? I think a lot of this needs to be rethought, not only given our circumstances, but also trying to put more of the people aspect around what it means to hire a person. I don't think you can outsource all that to AI, to websites, et cetera. I think it's incredibly difficult. Maybe for more junior level positions, entry level positions, but not for positions where you're going to have some oversight, supervisory, where there's a qualitative element.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to get to know someone, and I would argue that talking is the best way to do that. And sure, there might be technical things, but I can learn new skills. I'd say one of my hobbies is reading job ads. I've always done it as a way to just keep up on what's in the industry, what's going on. And I see a lot of jobs that advertise mediocre salaries, and the list of requirements must be a meticulous copy editor who never makes a mistake. The New York Times has a corrections page. Everybody makes mistakes. I understand if you're stressing that this person is the last line of defense, and frankly, that wouldn't be a job I'd apply for because, as I mentioned earlier, that's not my number one skill. But if you could get a dynamic leader like me, you know what I could hire below me? Someone who's really good at copy editing. And you know what that person costs? $35,000 a year. So you have to look at your whole organization. And maybe, you need someone who can plan and host television shows. And there's other skills that they want for that job, also does lighting. And you go, well, geez, I'm not really great at lighting. Well, fill in your team. Build around the skills you have. I've never understood why companies don't do this. In my last stint as a newspaper editor, and I'll go quick on this, I went to my boss and said, here's the team we have. Here's what everyone's good at. Let's reorganize people this way. Here's what I think people could learn. Let's cross-train that way, and then we'll be more versatile. And my boss said, well, you can't just move people around like chess pieces. And I said, you can if you move them into positions where they're going to like and succeed. And I think very few companies do that. And it holds you back, and you see that in hiring. That's why we struggle with diversity. That's why we struggle with finding new voices. It's something we work really hard on at The Motley Fool. We have a person in charge of diversity hiring to find different voices. Every company should be doing that. Try to find new sources of employees. And look, I took me 20 years of working to find a good fit. Feels like a company should have found me sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying in terms of revisiting hiring practices. I think, obviously diverse points of view. I think giving people a chance, really important. Dan, always a pleasure chatting with you. A bit disconcerting a story, but I think we ended on a high note. Always great talking with you. Enjoy the week, and we will talk with you very soon.
See you soon, Jeff.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, and a lot more, all in one place, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.